I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50. I got you. Gave my lawyer money and everything when I fight my case. I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure he made a way for me to be straight.
This is how Lil Durk stood by Jam until Jam turned on him. A recent viral video of Jam begging for his life shows how everything has changed. We know one thing about Durk. This is it. It's devastating and unpolished, and many people are wondering whether this is their only chance to see Jam. Let's look at everything because he has a high threshold for disloyalty. As far as we know, Durk was one of Lil Durk's most loyal fighters before he might have been the wrath that brought down the entire business. Which is why Jam begs for his life, gets retribution. But before we delve into the specifics of the federal case and the motivations behind the calls for Jam's head, we need to look at the subtleties that most people overlook, because this isn't just a random individual who got caught up. It was family, and loyalty is ingrained in the culture, based on, but often, the most sincere conversations can come from people you really care about. Because Jam and Lil Durk were childhood buddies and lived in the same area, their friendship precedes our knowledge of these particular cats, enduring the same struggles, poverty, and violence that shape young men in these communities. In a 2023 interview with DJ Jerry Jam, Jam described how, prior to his fame, Durk was like a brother to him, performing at block parties and local gatherings.
I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50. I got you.
They weren't considering record deals, federal charges, or anything else significant back when Durk was just another young Chicagoan trying to establish himself as a rapper. They were just neighbors, observing one another and hoping to leave the neighborhood together. Then life came. Life in Chicago is also highly serious. Jam was only 17 years old and on the verge of becoming a legal adult when he was found guilty of attempted murder in 2010 and sentenced to 12 years in prison. We won't go into the specifics of what transpired because what matters is what happened next. The vast majority of friendships end in this circumstance. Homeboys are incarcerated for over 10 years, while the majority move on, find new friends, prioritize new things, and live new lives. This is what it is like to live on the streets. Yep. Phone calls become shorter. The visits cease, and the letters cease. However, Durk Nahomi made a name for himself as his career took off and he began to make actual money, establishing his empire. We're talking about the kind of devotion that creates legends, not just keeping him on the books or giving him commissary money. Lil Durk provided Jam with unheard of support over his 12-year campaign. Real talk that most rappers won't even know how expensive good lawyers can be, particularly in cases involving attempted murder. But this guy was covering Durk's legal expenses while he was moving.
Lawyer money and everything when I fight my case. I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure.
When Jam finally left the prison in February 2022, Durk prepared a full welcome home package, but the help was just the start. We are discussing the type of homecoming that most people only imagine. Durk gave him more than simply a house. He bought Jam a car so he could travel freely, run his business, and start the process of restoring his life after serving more than 10 years in prison. However, Durk wasn't content and offered Jam a bed, a new beginning, and some safety. Durk valued his loyalty so highly that he gave out more than $50,000 in cash as a welcome home gift, more than most individuals saw in a year, as if it were inconsequential.
Jam get out that jam and give him 50, he ain't gotta ask again, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? He ain't gotta ask, bro.
In King Von's song, Back Again, Durk, for example, made a musical reference to this type of dedication by closing Jam, I handed him 50. So you don't need to ask again. Get out of that jam. This was so unusual and genuine that Jam's gratitude seemed sincere. And Durk was so proud of Durk for avoiding his homeboy that he made a song about it for the world to hear. Bro played his part and for social overplayed it. I love Bro for that. Interview 409-416 in 2022 and 2023. Durk included the homie on songs like No Complaints and Focus. He gave Jam a legitimate way to earn money, establish a career, and avoid going to jail. Now that he was back home, he was getting back on his feet. He was a part of a great enterprise, and he had the kind of loyal friend that Durk brought into the F family as an artist. Most homeless people never understand that this was supposed to be the happy ending to a story about genuine friendship persevering through the worst. But all changed on October 24, 2024, when Lil Durk was taken into custody in Florida on federal murder accusations, which are not state or local beef crimes and have a maximum penalty of life in prison. In 2022, Quando Rondo's cousin, Sevilla Lou Pab Robinson, was killed along with 5 other individuals as part of a conspiracy against the rapper. When the federal government steps in a case like this, they bring evidence, recordings, and records the kind of things that can bury you. But how in the hell they knew so was what left everyone on the streets in shock. Much information concerning FF's internal activities after Durk was arrested. Everyone's attention was focused on Jam, who was supposedly wearing a wire to collect evidence against Durk and others for years. People started to wonder who had been talking, who had been wearing wires, who had been recording talks, and who had been cooperating when the murmurs started. Prominent hip-hop musicians, like Chicago rapper King Yola, DJ Academics, and Whack 100 started to blame Jam for these grave charges, which weren't the result of lone internet trolls. These individuals have sources, contacts, and information that the broader public does not. Thus, their charges are not careless.
We learned a lot when all this came out, man. You know, there's been a lot of allegations, about people snitching. So the main person they're talking about snitching is OTF Jam.
On October 30th, 2024, video footage purportedly showing Jam getting very anxious close to Durk became viral. This was the most incriminating proof. Scholars claim that Jam had been wearing a wire since his 2022 release. But Whack 100 claims that he flipped after being arrested on a new weapons charge. It was thought that Jam had struck a bargain with the devil to escape more jail term when he was apprehended again soon after his release. The video, which showed a man who was visibly uncomfortable and concealing something, was widely believed to be the smoking gun. Assuming that he was carrying recording equipment, social media users were interpreting his body language and leaving critical remarks, such as, "Damn, they must not be able to read body language because he's moving hella weird." Instead of the loyal friend he was meant to be, they saw someone who may have been documenting every conversation, exchange of ideas, and moment of trust for the federal government. An indictment filed by a U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, which claimed that an F member had been acting as a confidential informant, also appears to support the concept in the court documents. Even though Jam wasn't specifically named, these federal lawsuits, as everyone knows, use initials and initials. Until the trial, they will use code names to protect their sources. What was so terrible about this alleged betrayal was not only the legal repercussions, but also the personal betrayal. This was no ordinary coworker or individual from the outskirts of the business. The cat Durk had embraced, trusted, and nurtured. As part of his inner circle was ostensibly family. Jam's encounters with Durk were all betrayals. If the claims were true, how cold must it have been to be cooped up in your home for 12 years? It's possible that every moment they spent together and every piece of information he was given access to as a trusted member was recorded and given to federal investigators after his release. He takes you home like a blood brother, and you give him back by helping the federal authorities collect evidence against him in the streets. The child ties you down in ways that most people never experience, because it was the kind of betrayal that people will never be able to forgive or forget. Social media went crazy as people examined every bit of information, every rumor, and every conjecture regarding what truly transpired. The hip-hop community's reaction was exactly what you would expect in a society where snitching is seen as more serious than murder, and cooperation with the authorities can result in lifelong blacklisting. Or worse, in actuality, some supported Jam by claiming that the proof was insufficient. But most people had already referred to him as a rat, and rats are not accepted in our society. Allow me to illustrate the extent of this rabbit hole. The emotions on the street were strange, and the evidence that started to come to light was disturbing. First, let's talk about how the federal government is addressing this problem, because you can see why people were so sure they had someone on the inside. Providing them with information once you begin to comprehend their methodology. A full criminal enterprise that employed violence to conduct business was the subject of Lil Durk's federal prosecution, rather than a single incident. The purported incident specifics were described. It's wild down. On August 19, 2022, the FBI claims that 5 men who were allegedly connected to F watched and followed Quando Rondo around Los Angeles as if they were trying to find him. After pursuing his black Cadillac Escalade with 2 additional vehicles and firing at least 18 rounds, including from a fully automatic gun, they apprehended him at a petrol station. When his relative was killed, Wando was unscathed. Examine. What had everyone wondered how the feds knew about the planning, coordination, and consequences? A number of industry insiders claimed that they had a snitch in the crew who provided them with extensive knowledge about what was allegedly a clandestine operation. WAC 100 stated simply in his frank analysis of the situation. There's a guy named F Jam that was wired a very ironic name. Jam got him in. You'd better listen carefully when WAC 100 begins discussing federal charges and snitches because he's been around long enough to know how they work, Wacko stated. In the interview that he had given him cars, $50,000 and kept it real for 12 years. In the end, he flipped the timeline that WAC had previously outlined, claiming that he had no criminal history, had never been a rat, and had never been involved in a gun case, incredibly shady in its organization. According to him, Jam wore a wire constantly for 2 years between his 2022 release from prison and Durk's 2024 arrest. He had been wearing a wire for the last 24 years before being released in 2022. The year of the Quando event. He immediately got involved in the matter, of course, even though he might have been keeping records for the federal government. The welcome home party integrated him into the family by using $50,000 in cash to purchase residences and cars for him. Covert recording devices could have ruined every conversation, every encounter, and every moment of genuine brotherhood. The only reason for Jam's alleged help was self-preservation. According to WAC 100, Jam found a new weapons case after being released, which is why he decided to flip rather than serve further time in prison. The details of this new court action have mostly remained secret, despite records indicating that Jam was detained in May 2023 on a warrant connected to his previous case. Cats that have served their time, however, usually try their hardest to avoid returning. The prospect of returning to a cell after a period of freedom might make you do things you otherwise would not have done, and 12 years in prison is a long time.
Didn't help when OTF Jam baby mama was murdered while he was locked up, and it had him thinking the worst about that situation.
Jam was allegedly helping a 15-year-old who is accused of killing James' baby mama, Octavia Redmond. On July 19, 2024, after Durk allegedly given the order. Even if Durk OTF is not directly linked to the crime, the timing of the incident prompted grave worries. When Jam's baby mom found out about his new lawsuit, she allegedly called Durk for legal help, but Durk allegedly didn't answer. If this is the case, King, it could be the reason Jam started to believe that F wasn't, in fact, family. Under these circumstances, even the closest of friends could become enemies.
I done did my last bid 4 years, but they ain't do
So I felt the type of way when I knew you had money. Not meaning that I want to do some snake to you like that, but in my head, maybe, not no snitch, but I might want to do something.
That point of view highlights how intricate these street interactions are. If someone shows you love and commitment, but then acts as though they aren't there when you need them most, resentment may grow. Although this anger may have rendered Jam vulnerable to FBI pressure, the evidence of his alleged involvement went much beyond gossip and conjecture. The recordings made by their informant, according to the prosecution, were essential to building the case against Durk. In addition to having an insider, the goal was to have someone who could provide the kind of concrete proof that could be presented in a federal court. According to several sources, the situation deteriorated when a song that Jam was allegedly recording surfaced online with lyrics that seemed to reference Durk and violence. Social media users were enthralled with the purported lyrics, which were, effectively, an incriminating diss tune. Nobody could verify that the recording was real, though. Smirk is the voice you heard. What he said, so bullets behind it. We aren't going to tussle and only be rapping to kill me. A rapper. So fornicators will have something to put in their music. The allegation that Jam leaked a song that implicated Chicago rapper Lil Durk and other suspects in the King Von Get Back attack may or may not be accurate. The situation was so dire that a phony social media report claiming Jam had been shot and killed was even posted. Even though the story was untrue, it showed how angry and suspicious Jam was. The Hood even made jokes and memes about the issue. Social media users mocked Jam using a video that allegedly showed him eating McDonald's during a federal interrogation, saying things like, "Bro snitched on Dirt for a Big Mac and fries." The fact that people believed the claims and swiftly shared the news of his passing showed how much hatred they had sparked. Those that violate the code are further alienated by the hip-hop community's humorous and culturally critical responses to these seemingly significant betrayals. Due to Durk's inactivity on social media and his lack of public appearances, rumors about him spread, and Jam did nothing to refute or validate them for months after his incarceration. Which made matters worse, the evidence against Durk appeared to be substantial, and most of it appeared to have originated from insiders who were familiar with the inner workings of federal relationships, lies, and the truth, as he sat in federal jail facing the possibility of life in prison if convicted. Questions concerning his location and the specific part he played in the crime were only made more pressing by this. It wasn't until December 2024 that F Jam spoke. The records will speak for themselves when the result is reached, and you will see that I was not involved in the inquiry or the building of the authorities' case. But Jam did more than simply refute the accusations. He categorically denied lying to Durk on Instagram stories, claiming that the truth would be revealed after the court documents were made public. He launched an offensive, attacking everyone, including the man who had shown him such loyalty. Saying that Durk shouldn't have gone to the crime scene if he didn't want to be accused was akin to putting him under the bus. People found it hard to focus after hearing the statement. After 2 years of whining about gangs this cat is now basically it. Would be unrealistic to expect someone who is supposed to be a loyal family member to react in this way, accusing Durk of causing his own legal problems. Jam also accused Boona and Jerry and other crew members of disseminating false information about him. He even singled out Nikki, Nicole, and Lexio as victims by acting as though he had been tricked. This man was essentially ruining connections with everyone. Above all, Jam promised that the legal discovery documents would prove his innocence and identify the real source of the material that the feds obtained. This bold claim placed everything in chronological order. The records would either further bury him or establish his innocence. The reactions of the street to Jam's announcement were split, as everyone was now waiting for the promised documents to fall. Regardless of where they stood, And some interesting developments in Durk's case began to bolster some of the claims made by Jam's accusers. While some saw it as a desperate attempt by a guilty man to transfer responsibility and cast doubt on it, others started to question whether the story was more complicated than it initially seemed, exposing shortcomings when they removed all mentions of Durk's song lyrics from a May 2025 supplemental indictment. Even though the song was recorded 7 months before the incident, Durk's defense team had been arguing that the prosecution had successfully misled the grand jury by using the lyrics by Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy as evidence. This was significant because it raised the possibility that the prosecution's case was weaker than it first appeared to be, untouchable as they initially asserted. But it was unclear what other parts of their case might be based on questionable grounds if they were willing to discard facts that had been crucial to their original presentation. An expert on the use of rap lyrics in court, Professor Eric Nielsen, harshly criticized the prosecution's tactics, describing their use of Durk's songs as dangerously sloppy and asserting that the substantial modifications made to the prosecution's case in the supplemental indictment they filed piqued the interest of legal experts in particular. The government's case did not seem good as academic experts criticized federal prosecutors for their negligence in treating artistic expression as literal admissions without doing enough fact-checking, removed the entire 9th paragraph from the original accusations. The original indictment's paragraph 9, which outlined the murder-for-hire payment structure in detail, has been removed, Wacko said. According to paragraph 9, defendant Wilson would arrange payment for the murder of Senior, also known as Lil Pob, and or pay the monetary award or bounty on defendant Banks' behalf. Accomplices, essentially. The murder-for-hire clause is no longer included in the indictment, because it suggested that the government's proof that Durk paid for the killing might not have been as trustworthy as they had thought. This erasure was noteworthy in order to comprehend the importance of this problem. In hip-hop culture, we must look at earlier instances where artists' crews reportedly they were flipped off. There have been previous instances of such betrayals, and the outcomes are always catastrophic. The Bloods of the 9 Trey Gangsters were 6ix9ine's most well-known engagement. 6ix9ine had a dramatic change of heart after being charged with RICO and testified against his former co-workers in an attempt to have his sentence lowered. Because of his candid and frank cooperation with the prosecution, he was permanently through her case in the YSL RICO case, Ghana. An outcast in the hip-hop world and a real-life example of what happens when you break the code. Showed how even legitimate actions could be viewed by the culture as snitching. In December 2022, Gunner agreed to a plea deal and was obliged to testify in court that YSL is a record label and a gang. And you have first-hand knowledge that YSL members or associates have committed transgressions in aid of the gang.
Is a music label and a gang, and you have personal knowledge that members or associates of YSL have committed crimes in furtherance of the gang.
Despite his claims that he wasn't working together, well-known rappers Lil Durk, Lil Baby, Meek Mill, Apollo G unfollowed Gona on social media and effectively treated him like a snitch. Even though F Jam's circumstances were different in both instances, his career took a serious hit, and he is currently trying to rebuild his standing in the community. The charges against Jam were mostly based on conjecture, rumors, and circumstantial evidence rather than a formal plea deal in which Guna made admissions in court. Unlike 6ix9ine, no one could point to any particular collaboration or public testimony. But even in the lack of concrete proof, the streets kept making judgments. The hip-hop genre because society is already suspicious of anyone who could help. Law enforcement. Many people believe the claims against Jam were true when they first started to circulate without waiting for concrete proof. To make matters worse, Durk's trial was delayed until October 2025 due to the intricacy of the case. The probe involved 20,000 digital evidence files, and more than 230 terabytes, as all of this legal drama played out. Jam's location was unclear due to pages of reports. People believed that he was staying away from Chicago due to safety worries stemming from the snitching accusations and the murder of his baby mama. It might take months or possibly years before the discovery documents that Jam said would identify him are made public. Target from a number of angles, the case's broader implications go well beyond the individuals implicated. It highlights the delicate balance that members of street-oriented hip-hop culture must maintain when they have to decide between loyalty and survival. King Yella provided a rational explanation of the psychology of these situations.
You got images. My OTF try to, you see, you know the GD, like, we don't give a, I ain't got no filter. If you do something, I'm calling you out for it. That's why, what it is. That's how we was raised anyway. Yep. Try to keep they together so they won't look bad.
This comment highlights the tension that often arises between the realities of spending decades in federal prison and the pressure to maintain one's reputation and street credibility. Hip-hop's exaltation of steadfast commitment does not always correspond with the tough decisions people must make when the federal government steps in. Known for speaking out against his beliefs, Charleston White offered his thoughts on the subject in his typically blunt manner.
Laughing at Durk like they were laughing at me when I went to jail. Lord have mercy. So ain't nobody laughing at Durk. Now it ain't funny. Now your favorite rapper go to jail and look like he got a no bond like me.
Although White's remarks were always divisive, they also reflected a broader conversation in hip-hop about the consequences of fusing street life with mainstream success and the responsibility that accompanies celebrity. Important questions still need to be answered when the matter is being resolved, such as whether the discovery materials Jam promised would truly will you stand up for him, or will they show additional evidence that implicates him? What does all of this mean for the camaraderie and loyalty that have been the pillars of hip-hop since its beginnings? Will the federal government's resources be adequate, or will Durk's legal team be able to successfully refute the prosecution's case? More significantly, what impact will this have on the fraternal and loyal culture? In any case, the damage to reputations and relationships is finished already. Watch this video and click on the cards that show up on your screen to see how the trust that made Durk and Jam's relationship so significant has been shattered by doubts and charges that might never be fully refuted. The bond between Jam and Durk was once regarded as an illustration